Well, everybody, the year 2023 is coming to a close. We're in December. It's the final death throes of the year, which is not a great way to say that, but we're going to go with it anyway. So let's take a minute to just have a nice little retrospective. Let's sit back. Let's reflect on the year of Flesh and Blood and what a year it has been. We've seen heroes rotate. We've seen new heroes come into the fore. We've seen a change in the Living Legend system. We've seen set releases, so on and so forth. So where do we begin? Well, let's set the stage. Last year, this time, we had just crowned our first world champion. That was Michael Hamilton, and he did it off of the back of a sort of an innovation in deck building with regards to one specific hero, but it has really rippled through and caused, sort of a change in the way that we've viewed the game, and that's with his Bowlander list. Icelander was not viewed in the way that it was until he really sort of blazed the trail with Icelander and Wounded Bull and throwing big attacks and, mathing out the finish of the game. And he did it off of the back of a U.S. National Championship win with that deck, kind of showing it at the time, just saying, this is the deck. And then he turned right back around and did it the World Championship with like next to no changes to the deck list after people already saw it and maybe had time to mess with it and test it. He just did it again. He just won. And he proved to everyone that not only was he the world champion, he also proved that Icelander was perhaps the best deck, just period, in the format, just in general. Dynasty, which released in December, didn't really do much to change that. It was a very cool set, don't get me wrong. In fact, I was flipping through my Dynasty folder a few nights ago, putting some stuff away, and I realized that I think Dynasty is rapidly becoming one of my favorite sets of all time. I love that set. I mean, it's got beautiful stuff like this in it. I mean, it's got Marvels that look probably like the best Marvels, period, end of story, outside of the dragons. It's really, really cool set. Nevertheless, it did not necessarily bring the power level or the, sort of archetypal changes that some people thought it might. And it didn't really change the meta too terribly much. But going into the new year, we still had access to a bunch of heroes that we no longer do. Like, for example, this was still a format that Oldhim was in. Lexie, of course, was still in it. Icelander still in the format. Brier still also in the format. All of those heroes were there, and yet Icelander was considered, in many opinion, the best deck in the format. Dromai, even at the time, was viewed sort of like from a fringe perspective, and almost no one put any respect or credence to playing the deck from an aggro perspective. I remember playing it halfway through last year and just loving the heck out of it and doing really well with aggro Dromai, and then Mara puts it on the map as far as competitive play goes the rest of that year, and continued into this year. But looking at the beginning of the year, it was not viewed in a beneficial light. It was sort of viewed as the secondary way to build the deck in favor of Big Dragon Dromai. But all of that was going to change through ProQuest season. We had dominance of those powerful heroes, and then we had our first set release of the year, and that was Outsiders, a set that provided a lot of power to a lot of different classes and heroes, but none more so than Lexie Livewire. Yes, it's strange. She wasn't even in the set, and yet she was fed by far the most. But that's not what everyone thought at the time. And do also keep in mind, that was a set that released several new heroes. In fact, one of them, Azuri, quite a powerful hero, has sort of been a mainstay at the top tables since she was released, and sort of just kind of pushed down a little bit by the wayside, just by the fact that Lexie and in some cases Azalea has sort of stolen the spotlight. But sitting there as a very powerful option and a hero that you can play in the assassin class. And we also got Riptide, who was none of the things I just described. Sadly, none of those things can be said to Riptide, but maybe one day Riptide will rise to the top tables and prove his mettle. Nevertheless, those came out in Outsiders. But what else came out in Outsiders? Very powerful arrows, and a card called Codex of Frailty. And all of those were put on display the weekend that set released, and it was a Realm Brawl, which was, by the way, also something we should talk about. This year, the year 2023, marked the first large-scale tournament circuit independently run from LSS. It was not run by LSS, it was run independently from them by the Realm Gaming Network, which is a fantastic LGS. And they put on a huge circuit around the US that culminated very recently, which we will talk about here later in the video. But at the first event that they hosted by MinMax Games in Chicago, none other than Brody Spurlock picked up the win on Azalea with those new cards off of the back of Codex of Frailty, Inspire Sniping, and all of these infecting shots and powerful laces. He picks up the win, and he punches his ticket to that final tournament that was actually just concluded very recently. And in doing so, sort of said, you know what? Azalea, best deck in the format. Everyone's saying it. Azalea's really good. But underneath it all, a lot of players knew. A lot of players knew that Lexie had gained a ton of power with the Outsiders set, and they were determined to put that on blast going into the first Pro Tour, really I should say the only Pro Tour of the year, and that was Pro Tour 3 in Baltimore. And that was a tournament because Lexie turned up and turned out a huge percentage of the player base picked up and played Fuseless Lexie, and really showed how good the deck was. But when you look at the top 8 of that tournament, you're going to see some crazy stuff because, yes, Lexies were there in droves, but 1 Oldhim snuck in and 2 Dromais snuck in. And both Dromais were different archetypes. That's not how you say it. Either Dromai, no, the 2 Dromais were different. That's what I'm trying to say. One of them was Big Dragon Dromai, more of a control style list, and one of them was Mara Ferris. And if you know Mara Ferris, she's an Empress. And so she played aggressive Dromai. She played aggro Dromai. Go Mara. I think that's the right call. Even before it was cool, she played it, and then she proved that it was pretty cool because both of those Dromais actually ate some of the Lexies on their way up. And then, unfortunately, for those Dromai players, they both got eaten by the masterful, just surgical, methodical Michael Fang. Put on a masterclass on how to play Oldhim and just crushed them. You should watch the semifinals and the finals. They were incredible games. In one, he played against the Fatigue style, sort of like late game setup deck, and he got there in the end. And then the other one, he laid the smack down in the finals to pick up the win and become the Pro Tour champion this year. And it was incredible. He's a fantastic dude, and I was so happy to see him win. It was very cool also because he picked it up on Oldhim, which at the time was kind of starting to come down in power level because Fuseless Lexie was just too disgustingly good. Nevertheless, that wasn't what sent Oldhim off into the sunset, and what actually sent Oldhim off into living legend status was a Calling Antwerp win by none other than Pablo Pintor. He sent off it's so funny because like this, he's sent off multiple heroes now. He sent off Chain with a win, and he sends off Oldhim with a win as well this year, and Oldhim rotates out of the format off the back of that Calling win by Pablo Pintor. And in doing so, I truly believe that was the moment that Lexie sort of took the reins of the meta and just said, this is my time. It's my time to shine, and I'm not going to share the spotlight with anyone. Throughout the summer months, she sort of dominated. And in fact, I will say it was between her and between Icelander. They kind of went back and forth picking up battle-hardened wins throughout the summer. And the question was this one the better deck? Was this one the better deck? But really, it was Lexie. Lexie was the dominant force of the year this year. And there was a hope that maybe that would change with Dusk Till Dawn. We were going to get 2 new heroes out of it. We're going to get a return from Prism Awakener of Soul, and then we were going to get a new hero, a new Shadow Runeblade in Vincent. And the question was, are those heroes going to be able to sort of mix things up and mix that meta up? And as we saw, those 2 heroes released at a lower power level. And the head scratcher was why? Why did they release at a lower power level? Well, the answer happened to come a few months later, and we just didn't see it down the pipeline until now. And looking back on it, it makes a ton more sense. There's a general overall power level throttling down through the rest of the year. That, coupled with the heroes rotating, means that we're going to have a much more really varied and exciting meta going into 2024. And those 2 heroes, I think, are going to slot in rather nicely as these heroes rotated out this year. Nevertheless, That set also brought something quite interesting and quite spicy in the form of Warmonger's Diplomacy in the expansion slot. A generic card, or really it wasn't even in his expansion slot. It was just a generic card in the set, right? And Warmonger's Diplomacy slapped down onto the scene and basically made a lot of people think that some heroes just got nuked off the face of the earth, when in fact they didn't necessarily, unless your name's Viserai, in which case you maybe perhaps did. But Azalea was the one that so many people thought were targeted against, in this meta by Warmonger's Diplomacy. And in some cases, that did actually happen. Some very clear signs from metas after that card released showed Azalea being played less. But I think some of that was players just thinking this card is just going to blow us out, so we can't play this hero. And then there's some other players like Levi Rauch that just said, you know what, I'm just going to play CNCs and E-Strikes and Ravenous Rabbles. And then you're going to play that card and I'm just going to hit you for 12, and then you're going to be real sad because I'm still playing the game. And that was kind of funny because there's this like whip turn of like, this card makes me unplayable, and then people are like, hey, it's not unplayable. That's what we got to experience throughout the summer months. But it all led to a really interesting few weeks before the US and the other nationals seasons around the world, because a few weeks before all of that came to a head, at a few battle hardens here and there, a rogue deck started popping up, and that rogue deck was Fatigue Brier. And in fact, it was a deck that, in my opinion, should not have ever been considered a rogue deck. And there were a lot of players that sort of considered it a meme deck and sort of looked at it like, this is not something you would want to bring to a tournament because on day 2, everyone knows the secret and they just know how to play against it. Well, it made Battle Hardened Atlanta top 8, and then it also happened to carry Charles Dunn to a US Nationals win. And in doing so, Charles Dunn actually punches the ticket for Brier to hit the Living Legend status, which is just bonkers because Brier doesn't get there off of the back of the Channel Mount Heroic build, or sort of like the Cheerios Brier, the aggro version of the deck. Brier gets there on a rogue version of her deck, playing control, basically playing like what Oldham might want to do, where you play for like these breakpoint attacks, you get like better blocking of abilities off of your breakpoints hitting, and then you're able to kind of like cobble together these like huge blocking turns and then flip the script and attack. And that's the deck that Living Legended out Brier, which is hilarious. But as she goes, so also goes Rosetta Thorn. Rosetta Thorn making its way out of the format also means that all Rune Blades feel the effect of that rotation. Yeah, Vinset players that were playing Rosetta Thorn, not a thing anymore. And unfortunately, Viserai players, also not a thing anymore. You got to go back to the drawing board on that front and come up with a new plan. And interestingly enough, Lexie doesn't win the US National Championship, but she wins a lot of other national championships. And in doing so, along with a bunch of other tournament wins, she finally reaches the end of her life cycle. That's kind of a weird way to say that. She reaches sort of the zenith, if you will, and hits the Living Legend status and moves on out of the format. Very recently, I might add, at the very end of the ProQuest season, she rotates out. Why did I call it? It's not a ProQuest. It wasn't ProQuest. Was it a ProQuest? I can't remember what it was. Let me know in a comment below. Was it ProQuest season that she rotated out in? I don't know. Let me know in a comment below. Nevertheless, she hits the Living Legend status. But you know who doesn't hit the Living Legend status? And that is Iyslander. Even though they made a pretty big Living Legend system change and gave more points in different places, Iyslander doesn't actually rotate in that same season, which means going into the World's tournament scene, Iyslander is still live. Lexie is now gone. What does that do for the World Championship, the second World Championship of Flesh and Blood? The stage is set. There's a new meta. Ice still exists. Dromai got a huge pump in power level off of the back of the new Bright Lights set, and the card Tome of Imperial Flame. We have new heroes, Dash.io, splashes the week before or so in a Nationals Championship. I think it was Australian National Championship, and picks up the entire thing. We have like the perhaps underwhelming Teklavossin and the kind of head scratcher of a Max, but it turns out you just play the mech and it seems to work fairly well. But all of this, like, coming back and forth, and maybe ninjas are now good again because, you know, there's some capacity not have to compete with Lexie, but you still have to deal with ice. There's a huge kind of question mark of how it's going to finish, and a lot of players just fall back and bring Icelander and try to run it out there for Worlds. And in some cases it works, and in some cases Dromize eat them, and in some cases ninjas start to push forward. And in our top 8, we get a world champion playing on Fi of all heroes in an Icelander meta. Alexandros on Fi is our new and well-earned world champion from Greece. Picks up the win on Fi, showing how it's done, playing against multiple Icelanders and just putting the gas down to win the world championship. Absolutely just incredible finish. You should go watch the coverage. It was really, really cool, really exciting. Some really great games as well. And it also means that Icelander still doesn't rotate out of the format, and instead has to rotate the next weekend, because the next weekend at the Battle Hardened, I think it was Wallonia, rotates off of the back of an Icelander win. She finally hits Living Legend status, picking up the win and moving out of the format. And not only that shakeup happens in the world of Flesh and Blood, but you also look at the Blitz format, because the skirmish season picks up right when the World Championship is sort of wrapping up. Skirmish kicks off, and the increased points in the Blitz format now means that a lot of the old guard powerful heroes in the Blitz format have begun to rotate. We're starting to see Chain go, Kano, Kasai, Ira goes. All of these heroes that you've known for so long and have sort of just kind of lorded over the top tables are now moving out of the way for these new heroes to come up and have their moment, their time to shine. And of course, this is the time for someone like an Emperor to pick up the slack. Dash gaining some points, Dorinthia showing up. All these heroes that maybe have been playing in those sort of second tier, third tier recesses now have some more space to go out there and play in the Blitz format. And then we are still concluding the skirmish season, but we also just concluded that Realm Rumble, that Realm tournament circuit I was talking about at the very beginning of this video. That concluded this past weekend, and it concluded with a $20,000 tournament put on by Realm in Ohio, and it was a massive, massive achievement. And picking up the win, which is just so poetic, on Azalea, is the first winner of the first tournament, Brody Spurlock. He won the Realm Brawl put on in Chicago by MinMax Games to start that tournament series off. And then he picks up the win at the very end of it all as well, on the same hero that kicked it off, on Azalea. And what a crazy way to sort of round out the competitive year. Absolutely hilarious. Kind of cool, though. I really enjoyed that was the final outcome. And what does that mean for 2024? I don't know, but I can't wait to find out, because I think the meta is going in some great places, and I can't wait to see what Heavy Hitters brings. Gosh darn it, if there's not a pirate, I'm going to riot. We need a pirate in 2024. Look, they just spoiled a freaking pirate-filled art card as a ranger card, okay? Look, pirates are not rangers. Pirates are pirates. Pirates are pirates. So we want pirates in the game. If you enjoyed this video, this little retrospective, let me know in a comment below. Make numbers go slightly higher. And if you want more stuff where I just talk at the camera so you can listen to it while you poop, let me know that as well in a comment below. As always, thanks for watching.